Previously on this home renovation series, I completed a front entry makeover where I took this front entry from drab to fantastic. Your front entry is the first impression of your home and you really want it to stand out. But now it's time to get ready for episode 4. Welcome to episode 4 of my home renovation series where we are going to be creating a half panel feature wall.
Did you know that you can create a wood panel feature wall that works as a bed head? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a wood panel feature wall that goes halfway up the wall that you can use as a bed head. So if your bed is just a bed base and doesn't have a bed head built into it, you can use this to create the illusion that you have a bed head. This also works if you do have a built-in bed head. You just need to make sure that you select the panels that are going to go higher up than where your bed head stops and put the shelf up higher than the bed head so that the bed will still fit underneath. So let's dive into the tutorial and let me show you how you can create a stunning feature wall that works as a bed head.
This is the wall that we're going to be working on. It is just a stock standard plain wall in a bedroom. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is cutting the lengths down to size. Now each one of these lengths is 2.7 meters or 2700. What I'm going to be doing is cutting the lengths in half, so I'm going to be cutting them at 1350. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because when I did my measurements of the wall space and I went to purchase the lengths, I worked out exactly how many lengths I was going to need to cover the whole wall on the basis that I was cutting each one of these in half and I would get 2 lengths out of each of them. If you wanted to have it higher or lower, you could do that and just select a different length to cut at, but it's really a personal preference about how high you want it to be. This way it is going to be a little bit higher than if somebody has that bed head already. It's not going to matter too much. So you're just going to get your tape measure and you're going to measure the lengths. So I'm going to measure the 1350, which is half of 2700. Just put a little mark there. I want to try and be as accurate as possible because these are all going to then have to level up at the top to be the same height. And I'm putting a shelf on top. So if there's too much of difference between each of them, they're going to be hard to get them all leveled. Now, you always want to double check and triple check your measurements because once you have cut it, there's no going back, especially when you've got no excess. And I'm cutting mine directly in half. And I don't have any spare panels, so I've got to be really careful not to get my measurements incorrect. Then for cutting, all I'm going to do is turn my miter saw on, making sure my hand is away from the miter saw and then pulling down. I've got my slide on because this clamp is a little bit wider than what the standard saw length is if I just drop it straight. So I will move it forward, cut and then move backwards. So then you should have a really nice clean cut on your timber. I'm going to make a pile of these, the ones that I've cut and the ones that are the right length. So in theory, they should be exactly the same height. Pretty close. And I'm just going to do the same process for all of them. I did have one length that was a little bit shorter already, so I'll just cut this one down at 1350 as well. And then I'll just have a little bit of an off cut on this piece. So once again, lining it up. My saw has a laser guide, which is perfect because then I just line up this laser guide with the mark that I just created for the length. Then I just needed to repeat the process over and over again to cut through all of these wood panels, making sure that they were all at the same length. Now that they were all cut down to size, it was time to start installing them to the wall. I'm going to be installing them with liquid nails and also with my brad nailer and 18 gauge brad nails. I use a silicone gun to apply the liquid nails onto the back of each panel and then apply that panel to the wall with the brad nailer.
I use 3 nails in each of these panels, and I don't want to use too many nails because the more nails you add in, the more holes you have to fill. You also need to make sure that before you start applying the panels that you check the wall to make sure that there is no electrical wires in behind the wall that you could hit with your nails. You also need to be sure that the nails are not going to be too long and not going to go too far into the wall. So just select the correct length nails. So I'm almost about halfway with these panels. Now the next thing that I'm going to have is that I'm going to have to cut around the power point. So I'm going to get up to the power point. I'm going to either get 1 or 2 more full panels. Then I'm going to be mindful of the power point and make sure I cut the height around the top and the bottom. And I'm going to need to cut a tiny little snippet that I can sit underneath that power point. So I'm going to put a couple more panels on and then we will start working around the power point and I'll show you what I'm going to do there. So it looks like I'm going to fit 1 more panel. Just test it before I cut them. Yep. Okay, so get it the right height and then mark out where I need to cut around the power point. So now that I've got the marks where I marked out around the power point, I'm just going to copy that around a little bit to bring it onto the face so I can see it and know where I need to cut with my miter saw. So I'll put the little lines on there and then I'm just going to line that up once again with my laser guide and cut that straight on that line. So now I've got my big bit and then this little bit here, I need to actually cut out where the power point is, but still have a little bit on the bottom. So I'm going to cut the next line down where I showed that I marked out the power point, and then that little bit is just going to get glued on underneath the power point. So now this little piece here should clip in underneath and sit in nicely there. And then I'm going to have another piece up the top there that's going to clip in. So given how close it is to the power point, I don't want to use any brad nails because I obviously have wires that are going to be all around this power point, and I don't want to have any brad nails too close to the power point. So I'm just going to slide this in here and I'm just going to glue that on. I'm not going to put any brad nails in there. I'll then attach my next piece. And when I attach this piece, I'm only going to put the brad nail in the middle and the top. I'm not going to put a brad nail down too close to the power point. The glue is going to hold that in place anyway, so we don't need to worry too much about that. So I'm going to need to do 1 more cut. And this one's going to be a bit of a tricky cut. And I'm going to have to probably use my multi-tool for this cut because we're going to have this on here. But we're going to have the section that we need to cut out for the power point. So I mark sort of where, so you'll be able to see out there that I've marked out where the power point is, and now I'm going to need to cut that. And as we just saw with the miter saw, well, the miter saw doesn't really like doing little small intricate type cuts like that, so I'm going to have a go at cutting that out with my multi-tool. So cutting out around the power point is by far the hardest part about feature walls. If you can easily remove the power point and then put it on the front of the panels, if you've got access to an electrician, that's probably going to be the best option. But if you do need to cut around the power point, you can do what I did and use the multi-tool to cut around the power point as close as you can and get that nice and snug. So just going to move on now and keep going with the panels. The only thing I need to be mindful of is the height of the wall may change. So if I am going along, I'm lining them up at the top because you want to make sure they're all going to be level on top where the shelf is going. But there may be a little bit of a gap on the bottom. If the wall is on an angle and you have a bow in your wall, then you may find as you get towards the end, some of these are going to be either too long or too short, and you may just need to cut them a little bit height-wise to make them fit perfectly. So I'm just going along and using my finger just to line them up at the top. And I've still got a little bit of a gap at the bottom, so I'm doing okay at the moment. I don't need to do any more cuts. Once again, I'm still fairly close to the PowerPoint, so I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom. But then by the time I get to the next one over, I should be fine and far enough away from the PowerPoint. I did check with the stud finder to see what was in here behind the wall before I even got started. And the stud finder has a way to show you if there's any wires, and it will go red if there is wires behind the wall. Now this one is falling down a little bit, so I just need to hold it up while I grab it in place. I then just needed to continue along the wall, applying each panel individually one by one until I got to almost the end, where I did need to make another slightly difficult cut. I definitely didn't have all of the right tools for doing this particular job, and it wasn't exactly how I wanted it to turn out, and the cut didn't get a nice smooth straight cut because I didn't have the right tools. A table saw would have been the best option to this, and just feed that through the table saw to get a nice straight cut. Alternatively, my circular saw would have been the next best thing, but I also didn't have that on the day, so I just used my miter saw and my multi-tool to get a cut of this to cut that end panel down to size. They definitely weren't perfect, but they got the job done. I then cut my shelf down to size and started with my no more gaps to go along and fill all of the gaps on each side of these panels, and then also in the crack between each of the individual panels. This was a fairly slow and tedious job because I had to use the silicone to apply it down the crack and then use my finger to smooth it out. Once all the no more gaps and the wood filler had dried on these panels, I needed to come back and sand it all down. So I got a piece of hand sandpaper. Because of these curvy grooves, it was just going to be near impossible to use an orbital sander, and I just used the sandpaper to go along with my hand and sand in each of these grooves. Once I was finally finished with all of the sanding, it was then time for the fun part to get out the paint and paint this wall. I chose this stunning bluish green color, which I'll put the name of down in the video description because I know you're going to fall in love with it just as much as I did. Once again, because of all of these little grooves, I needed to use a paintbrush to paint this wall. I wasn't going to be able to do it with a roller because the roller wouldn't be able to push into each of these individual grooves, and the paintbrush or a spray gun were going to be the only ways to go. However, I had already finished painting the rest of the room, all of the white trim and the rest of the walls, so I didn't want to use a spray gun because I would need to cover absolutely everything, and it was just going to be easier for me to use the paintbrush and go along and carefully paint this wall. I needed to paint 2 coats of paint to get a really nice solid coverage of colour, but thanks to my quick dry paint, I only needed to wait 4 hours in between my coats, so I painted the first coat in the morning, I let it dry for 4 hours, and then I came back in with my second coat of paint. We've now pretty much finished our half panel feature wall. I've installed all of the panels, I've filled all of the cracks in between and then sanded off the excess. I've then painted on 2 coats of paint. The last thing we need to do is add the shelf, which is the final finishing touch. So I've already stained the shelf and added the top coat, and now I just need to put the shelf in place. So I'm going to sit the shelf up on top of the wall, and then I'm going to apply some nails coming down to hold that shelf in place. Once the flooring goes in, then we'll be able to stage the room and show you how amazing this wall turned out. The new carpets were installed and they looked spectacular, and then we brought in the furniture to stage the room. Once the furniture was in there, I just had to add a couple of finishing touches, and one of those was some shears. I like to use shears in bedrooms even where I have a blind because I like the look and feel that they give to the room. They also have an added value in this room because it is facing the street front, and they can use the shears to close off the room but still let in lots of natural light. So let's take another quick look at our boring room before and what we started with, and then what we have now and the amazing half panel feature wall that we have created. I really love how this bedroom makeover turned out, and I think the colors work so well together. I'd love to know what you think of the makeover down in the comments, and make sure you hit subscribe and come back next week where I will have a stunning $2,000 kitchen transformation that will blow your mind. But before you go, I just want to show you a quick preview of what you're going to be in for, because you are not going to want to miss this. This is the kitchen that I'm giving a transformation. It was so disgustingly dirty when I started out, but I'm going to be ripping out this old backsplash. I'm going to be painting all of the cabinetry and adding some beautiful, stunning wood details, and I bet you're going to want to see how it turns out. If you missed episodes 2 or 3 where I did a complete bathroom makeover and a front entry transformation, they're linked here for you to go and check out now.